Hi, and welcome to Hypothetically Intentional, where we ask the question, what if we set intentions with everything we do? I'm your host, Michelle Albers, and today I have special guest, Becca Engle. Welcome, Becca.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited you're here. Before we start the podcast, I always have one of us set an intention, and I think I'll take it away today. My intention for this podcast is I really want to learn from you because I have never met you. This is the first time we're speaking in person. And the little bit that I do know about your story and your message, I really want to drop in and just be present and learn from you.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So I'm really excited you're here. And we talked about a couple different ways we could go about this podcast. And I feel like I want to start with just like, could you tell all of us a little bit more about you? And because you're in a lot of podcasts right now. I did also see that.
Yes,
So you have a message that you're looking to get out into the world, and I want to know more about that.
sure. I'm Rebecca Engle. I was nonverbal until 4 years old. I started talking at 5. I said 22 words at the age of 5. Doctors told my mom I'd never do anything you could train a monkey to do. I'd never be independent and I'd never be verbal. They told her to find a hobby with all the time and hours I would be in therapy because I would be away from home so much. My mother told them that her hobby was my life and went home, took me out of therapy, and worked on making me independent and verbal, functional. And ever since then, my mom has been my biggest supporter. And I am working on my master's degree now. I skipped the 11th grade, I skipped a year of college. I graduated from high school and my bachelor's degree honors. I'm also a special needs advocate. I advocate for neurodivergent individuals to be seen, heard, and valued, both in the business world and the education world. My master's degree is a focus on special education policy. So I'm working on policies that help special education students thrive. And I am also a 10-time international best-selling author, 6-time international best-selling poet.
Nice. You know, the loudest thing I heard in that message, perhaps, or one of the loudest things, is the message that you received was not received, or the message that your mom received was not received by her, and she chose a different path. And then the other thing I heard in that, and I don't know if they're connected, but I suspect they might be, and I would love to hear your take on this, but it feels like that the willingness for your mom to show up in some kind of way to advocate for you and then teach you how to advocate for yourself drove you in such a way that you were like, oh, not only am I going to win, I'm going to skip grades and be, you know what I mean? Like almost like there was an extra little oomph in your choices that were like, I do not accept this message that I was told in the beginning, and I'm just going to make sure that there's no doubt that that was not true.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yes, and my mom has always told me, I've always had to fight for everything I've gotten in life. I mean, I didn't have to fight this much for the big things. I had to fight this much for the tiny things, the speaking, the verbals, um the comprehension. I mean, I always had to figure out how to do it and figure out it was much more difficult than anyone else had to experience in a lot of instances with people in my circle, at least. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people dealing with a lot more challenges than I ever will. And I will not discredit that. However, in my life, my brothers were neurotypical, straight A, perfect, um, little successful boys that were interested in the arts. And, I have another brother who he memorized every word in the English language and could probably tell you 25 words in 25 different languages if you told him. And then there was me who, didn't talk until I was 5, had learning delays, was in a self-contained classroom setting, and I just had to kind of figure out how to navigate all of that.
So because you said you advocate for others,
Yes.
how does that look? Because I imagine that's a really vast, like Well, I guess the way I see people is like everybody has their own unique needs. And to show up in a way that meets those needs, how do you hold that space for the people that you work with?
So, one of the best parts about my college education so far is I've been able to take educational psychology classes on top of my ed policy courses and substitute to hone my skills. So, I've studied a lot of how the human brain works and how it works specifically in the adult and children setting and just child development. And so, a lot of my advocacy, I kind of hop on a phone call with a parent and I kind of tell them, hey, tell me about your child. Like, give me what you know about your kid and tell me what they currently have and tell me about their grades. I'll look at all their academics, any resources that they provide me, um, star scores, which is the Texas test, or whatever their state test is. I'll look at all of their data and I'll break it down. I'll go through all of it. And then I sit there and I hone in on things. And then I go through their child's individualized education plan with them or their 504 plan. And I will specifically say, you need to say this in the meeting. You need to say this in the meeting. You need to advocate for this. And I will bring up the brain sciences behind why. I will bring up even examples of child behavior, especially if they tell me, you know, my child's been punished for XYZ. I'll figure out why that behavior is happening to the best of my extent, because there's always a reason for a behavior, um, and address those needs. So a lot of the time, I can use both my personal experiences, but I've also had to study a lot in educational psychology to kind of understand why things are happening because obviously every kid is different and not every kid is me. So, on top of both my personal experiences, I've had to kind of look outside that box and pull my personal experiences to address, but also pull educational psychology into that.
That's really beautiful. That's amazing. I love the awareness of I have my own life experience and I know not everyone is like me. I also have this education and I'm literally looking at every individual with their own data because I think that's sometimes what I don't know, like I got really frustrated growing up being put in like assumption boxes. It's like, well but that's not how I tick. So why are we doing this?
Yes.
Um so you mentioned a virtual event, which I want to shift into if that's okay.
Yeah.
I want to know more about it because you said you're hosting a virtual event coming up next month, and
Yes.
I'm just very curious about what that might look like and how you approach it because it's virtual, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I am a speaker, one of the five speakers for a summit called the Voices of Inclusion Summit. It's hosted by us speakers, and the main host is Aaron, the inclusive dad is his at. And we are talking about just our needs. There's neurodivergent individuals, there's disabled individuals, there's individuals who have navigated mobility issues. And we are talking about how we live our lives and navigate that and how we can change laws, policies to be more inclusive in both education, the world. Um, I'm the only educator in that mix, so there's tons of varying experiences in this summit. Um, and that will be April 5th. It's from 12 to 4 and or 12 to 2:30. My apologies. And we will be discussing that broad just inclusion in the United States, in the world, and how we can be more inclusive as a society.
That's awesome. I love how broad that is. I love how like you're the only educator and then there's all these different perspectives in a room. I think the more we can get perspectives in a room for the greater good, the better the world gets. Coming
Yes.
from that place of like compassion and understanding and like seeing and being seen. And I just think that's such a, I think it's, I don't know, I think it got lost somewhere along the way. I think it sometimes feels really rare to me. And I don't, maybe that's not fair, but it does feel rare to me. So
Yeah.
when I hear you say you're offering that, I'm like, yes, more please.
Yes.
That's amazing. I also wonder about your books. I know
Yes,
I'm like kind of jumping from one thing to the next, but I'm so curious about everything that you do and
sure.
everything that you're saying is so I'm really I resonate with the see and be seen and really actually being heard and understood. Like, what are your needs in this moment going forward in general? I just think so many times we get so lost in our own like mental anguish, I'll say, but maybe that's not the best way to put it. But like we get lost in our own stuff, our own day to day, and we
Yeah,
forget to consider the needs of others sometimes. And I think
yeah,
that's a little sad.
I agree. So, I've been in poetry anthologies: Until Your Worth, Until Your Best Life, Until Your Self Love, Until Your Gratitude, Until the Magic, and Until Your Grit. Those are my six poetry books. So all of them include poems of mine, and other poems, but Until Your Worth focuses very much on finding love and respecting yourself, and it's tons of different perspectives. Um, some people have struggled with family death. Some people were struggling with, disability. Others were struggling with, their relationship with their spirituality, like tons of different perspectives. And then I was also in Until Your Best Life, which is finding what you're grateful for, and living your best and finding what you want to achieve in the future. My favorite poem that is in there, I have three poems in there. It's Stepping Stones. It's about moving forward even on the challenging days and even when people doubt you. Um, and then I was also in Until Your Self Love, which is about loving yourself. And my favorite poem in there talks about um, loving yourself even when you're a pain in the ass to yourself. And that's how
I
it
love
ends
that.
too. And then another piece, in Until Your Gratitude, I talk about why I'm grateful to wake up every day. Um, Unseal the Magic is kind of, like goal related. What are you achieving? What are you working towards? And then Until Your Grit is very focused on grit. Like, why do you have power? Why do you keep going? I was also in Woman of Purpose, which is a co-authored book between 33 other women. And this book was global and reached multiple countries as a bestseller. And I was kind of just talking about my story. It's very autobiography-esque. The visionary author was Shyla Day. Um, there were 13 women in this book nominated for a global award, and I was one of them. I was a nominee for
Congratulations.
four of the awards, and I was nominated ultimately for one. Um, so I was top three for four of them, and then top one for one of them. And then I will also be in Autistics on Autism, which comes out March 25th. So that's
Ooh,
super
that's coming up.
exciting. Yes. And that book is autism experiences, all from college kids who are working through school. And there's stories that you need to hear about what helped us get to college. And then I was also in Force Magazine, which is a magazine-esque type in last October, and that's about resilience and redemption. Um, and then Step Into My Shoes is my personal book. It's about um, a child going through the classroom as an autistic kiddo and navigating life and navigating school and trying to communicate with parents, and that parent trying to communicate with the teacher, and them not understanding her needs, and feeling very lost in the sauce. And then my anthology comes out October 1st, and that is a book with 12 other authors that are all connected to me. It's through our lens, and I am the visionary author for that. And it's perspectives on disability. So we have therapists, teachers, parents, and people with disabilities all talking. And we have authors from the US, British Columbia, other parts of Canada, and Australia.
That's a lot of books. That's incredible. I love that you're a visionary of this, of the one that comes out in October. That's amazing. I think I saw a post I might be wrong, but I feel like I saw a post with your book, Step Into My Shoes, right? Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Where like a parent, like a kid was like reaching for your book and the parent was like, no, no. And then you actually stepped in and like explained why it might be yes, yes.
Mhm.
Do you find that you get resistance from parents?
Yeah. So a lot of the time, I think people pick up my book. Kids will be interested because I'm an author, and that's a big deal to them, you know. And a lot of times, parents will focus on the fact it's self-published,
Oh,
um,
wow.
and they'll be like, "Well, it's not a real book." I've even gotten the occasional, "This is just another book about This is just another book about emotions. I don't know why we need it." Because they read Step Into My Shoes and they think emotional regulation, right?
Oh,
Like feelings.
yeah.
They don't think
Yeah.
about the story behind it. And then other people have told me straight up that teaching their kid about autism, they're too young to teach their kid, like their kid's too young to know about autism, which horrifies me because the kid that has autism, that's your child same age, they're not horrified. Like they're like, what? Like there's kids in their classroom that are going to have autism. So no kid is too young to understand that people have a disability. Like it's not, it's not some disease or some, um, sexual encounter. Like, this is a disability. There's people who live with it at birth. Like, why are they
Yeah.
too young to understand that?
Have you found a way to, I mean, I guess this is a big question and maybe not even a fair one, but like to unlock that for those parents that say it's too long, have you found a message or a way to say it to at least perhaps open a door or soften the hard no so that maybe they don't say yes that day, but you know that what you said impacted them a way that has their wheels turning? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I bring up and I just say, "Can I tell you my story?"
Mm.
And I'm like, "Can I tell you what I went through as a child and a little bit about my own life?" And a lot of the time they are willing to sit there and listen. Um, because I am an adult, I'm a mutual. So I say, do you have time to hear about my story? And some will say no, but when they say yes, I give them a quick rundown. I tell them exactly. I say, I was nonverbal. I went to school. I was an honors student. I graduated, and I give them that quick rundown. They're like, whoa. And I said, so this is exactly the character in my book is based off that girl. So, I was highly bullied. I got slammed into walls. I got sexually harassed, and now I'm this young 22-year-old who's made a success of myself. And so I want your kid to see that potential in the autistic kids in their class. And a lot of the time they'll open up to it. And in my book, I never bring up the specific disability. I just talk about a kid who struggles with learning, really. And I tell them that I don't diagnose anyone or talk about diagnosing anyone. The book is very much just a little girl who struggles to understand those around her.
Mm. I love the openness of that. Because I think sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I think like if we get really specific into, I don't know if labels is the right word, but sometimes labels make things messier than if we can describe an experience without the labels and just have an understanding of this is about a girl who had a hard time understanding,
Mm-hmm.
well, A, it makes it relatable to w way more people.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing I find with healing, and I wonder how you feel about it, but I've over time and just working with clients and doing my own healing journey, I've discovered that like the way we label and talk about our experiences and our stories and like the things that happened in our lives
Mm-hmm.
is vastly different. And the experiences themselves of like the pains we felt or the things we struggled with or what challenged us aren't actually all that different. You can have two people with very different stories who have very similar feelings on the inside about how it
Mm-hmm.
impacted them. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I find really, I guess, beautiful on some level is
Mm-hmm.
that we claim to be so different. And then when you start really getting into the journey and the challenges of life, it's like, are we though? I mean,
Yeah.
yes, we're very different. Everyone's unique and has their own special ways and things. And when you get to like the feels of it all and the heart of
Mm-hmm.
it all and the core of it all, it's like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. That's just my way of saying I really love how open you described your book because what it tells me is it can touch many, many, many more lives potentially because you kept it from that space of, um, I guess openness is the word that comes in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my favorite experience was I had a sixth grade girl come up to me at a tea shop. I was hosting a book signing. And she goes, "Can I read your book?" And I said, "Sure." Sweet girl. She listens, she works it, she gets through it. And she goes, "What grade is this girl in?" And I said, "Elementary school." And she goes, "Oh, well, I really relate to the character." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, then you can put her in any grade you want." And I go, "Because that's the magical part of books." And I said, "Do you have a learning disability?" And she goes, "No." She goes, "I'm just highly bullied."
Hmm.
And she just starts telling me about the bullying that she's going through at school. And, it motivated one of my next books that I've already written. I just need to put together. Um, and, like this sixth grade girl who doesn't have a learning disability at all, who just struggles at school, related to this book about pre-K me. Like it was amazing to see.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think so much of what you're saying, uh, I don't know. It's like I'm resonating with not only your message, but also finding myself realizing the importance of, I think connection is the word.
Mhm.
Like, and we can't, it's hard to get connection if we're not willing to be seen and to put ourselves out there, you
Yeah.
know? And I think I used to teach preschool. So I have this perspective of parents and how they show up and engage with their children, and then the children themselves, and how sometimes that felt like it was kind of a disconnect. Not every day, and
Yeah.
I'm not like judging the parents in that way. I'm just saying sometimes it felt like there were days where the parent and the child there was a total disconnect there, and to discover and uncover why that might be required like both of them to be in a room together and explore that. And
Yeah.
sometimes you need a mediator, I guess, is the way. Sometimes you need a guide or a mentor or a teacher who can help you see each other in a new and different way because I think sometimes we get hung up in our own like this was a frustrating day and I can't get to a place of calm on my own, so I need help, with that. And I that's what I'm hearing you say is that you find the way to help them find each other in a way that's accurate of what's really going on versus I don't know, versus whatever else is getting in the way. And I think that's pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
So you said you also teach about how to create events that are neurodivergent friendly and accessible and all of that. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Or a lot,
Yeah,
whatever you got
sure.
time for?
No, you're good. So when I was attending networking events, one of the things I realized was they took a small space and they crammed 50 of us into this small space and they said, "Everyone talk, go."
Oh gosh.
Ah, right. Or they would go, "All right, so we're gonna do like networking in a circle." So they would have us go in a circle, and then they have another group in a circle, and they would have us walk through the circle and talk one on one. But then when the music played, like musical chairs, where the music would
Hmm.
play, and then you would stop after the music stopped, and you would talk to someone. And oh my God, I couldn't even get my thoughts together because I was so busy on focusing on the music. My emotional regulation was completely off. I'm talking to completely new people. As I just told you, I do 1,000 things. So where am I even supposed to start? And how do I tell myself when to shut up? How long am I going to have the time to talk? Right? Like all of these thoughts are going through my autistic brain. And then my ADHD is like, woo, right? So I'm like 60 cups of coffee through. And I'm like, please. And so I attended all these events. And there's silly activities like that. Or you'd walk in, they'd be like, find a table. Well, okay, now I'm thinking about who I'm going to communicate with, who's going to best serve me. You know, am I taking a chair from someone else? Or I would walk into an event and they wouldn't have seats at all. Like it was just standing and that was it. You had to stand and it was 3 hours and you were standing the whole time.
Wow.
And so I just saw all these events and I was like, these are so unfriendly to disabled individuals. When I started my business, I had and I still have it, but it was much worse. I have a mobility disability. I have plantar fascial fibromatosis, which is tumors throughout your whole entire foot. And so every 20 to 30 minutes, my legs used to go completely numb and I would fall over if I didn't sit down. Or I would get an intense pain. And then it turned into neuropathy and it was rough. So I finally was like asking at these events, I was like, oh, can I have a chair? And they were like, well, if you're here, you have to pay to sit down. Or there was like some silly, like, and I would run into all these difficulties. And I was like, okay, so how are you helping disabled individuals? They were like, well, don't you have a wheelchair? And I was like, well, no, not for peripheral neuropathy. Like, no. I was like, I can walk completely fine. I was just like, when I stand for 30 minutes straight in the same direction, like a knight, I'm going to be in pain. Um, and it was ridiculous. And I was like, I need to put together and start advertising how we can stop this problem. I was like, because if I don't do it, nobody will. So I started applying to speak at things because really I only focused on education at first. I started to apply and I was like, I'm going to go to events and speak about how we can make our events neurodivergent friendly. And so I have an event this summer. It's called the Hustle and Socialize Conference, and I'll be talking about kind of how to do that. But providing chairs, making sure you don't have loud blasting music while people are trying to talk, um, being aware of your audience, right? Including that in your event. Is this event sensory friendly? Is this event friendly? Is there a place to walk out and breathe when I'm overstimulated? Will I be allowed back in if I need to take a second? Um, is there a bathroom? Because some of us disabled individuals, there's been networking events where there's not a bathroom. And I said, if someone has an issue with their bladder or something, which I don't, but if you did, right? Like, are you going to be able to like withstand a 3-hour event? Right. And so just addressing all these things and how we can make sure that we're advertising properly that these events are either sensory friendly or not. And it's okay if you don't have the resources to make your event that way. But if you don't, then make sure we're making sure that our disabled populations are aware of that. I've been to events that were in old buildings and they put all the vendors on the second floor with no elevator. And I couldn't walk stairs for a while. So I was like, how am I supposed to vend? And they'd be like, sorry, oh well. And so like thankfully, the one event I did, I had a friend who literally like helped pick me up the stairs. But like had I not had friends who could do that and literally load my stuff to the second floor, I wouldn't have been able to participate in this event I paid to be at.
Right. What I'm hearing from you in that is, well, two parts. I hear, well, first of all, for people offering events, be really clear in describing what and where you're offering, right? Like, where are you offering it? What are you offering? And really describing that, being descriptive within that. I'm also hearing you speaking about the importance of advocating for yourself, like asking questions. If it's not clear, make sure you ask questions and get clear, like if they don't make it clear. And I love both sides of that. I love that both are important. I love the message that like always advocate for yourself, always, don't be afraid to ask for what you need and to discover and uncover if it's possible. But then also be clear on the other side of things of what you are offering. And then the flip side of that is like sometimes it's not possible to make something accessible to absolutely everyone. And we accept that too. Sometimes the space doesn't allow for like there's not an elevator in an old building with two things, but like you paid for an event and didn't know that. That seems a little like, hey, just so you know, there's going to be stairs and you're going to have to haul. Like as a vendor, I want to know how much am I going to have to haul and how far? You know,
Mm-hmm.
just let people know and be informed is such an important piece. And I think it circles all the way back to that seeing and being seen and heard. It's like, listen, see, have a conversation. Don't be afraid to have a conversation. Sometimes
Yep.
it feels like we're afraid to have conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And part of that, I think, and maybe this is just me being old, but part of me thinks that's like social media.
Yeah.
I just like we don't have as much like face-to-face interaction and engagement, and we don't even think to, oh yeah, it wasn't there. I don't know. I'm just going to assume it's not going to work for me. And instead of taking a chance and asking a question, we just tap out
Hmm.
instead of
Yeah.
leaning in. It's like lean
Yep.
in.
Yeah.
Is there well, I guess I was going to say, is there anything else you want to say? But I feel like I want to be more specific than that. I feel like I want to talk to the parents. I feel like if you had a message for parents to just open a door and find some ease, or maybe it's not even ease, maybe it's support to support your child or your children, do you have like a really just brilliant nugget that helps them consider maybe something that they haven't thought of before?
Yeah. I was I was guessing, let me think. I'm thinking, if you're talking to parents with disabled children in this instance, I think slow down, let your child also advocate. And
Mm.
I had a great conversation about this morning. Like, the child knows themselves best, and that child may not communicate in the way that's preferred, but when they're um presenting to you, try to read what they're communicating. Try to understand. And I think I found what best helps me is finding books that convey different emotions and then having the child relate to the books. And not, that doesn't just go for mine. There's a lot of great resources out there. A great one for dyslexia dysgraphia is Thank You, Mr. Falker. And
Thank you,
it's
Mr. What did you say? Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Who?
Falker.
Oh, Falker.
Yeah. And it goes in dyslexia and dysgraphia and a third grader struggling to read. And then she runs into her teacher that taught her how to read 30 years later with dyslexia. It's an amazing story. But there's tons of resources and books out there like that one. And I feel like just being able to, I've had students who don't communicate in a way that I necessarily understand. And I'll be like, hey, let's listen to some stories. And they go through the story with me. And then I'm like, is there a character you relate to? And they may only be able to point at a book, but now I have an image, right, of what that child needs. And you can do that with your own child. You may not necessarily um, know 100% what your kiddo needs, but when they hear a story, they may start connecting ideas from the story to their own well-being, and they may be able to tell you what they need. Listen to your child. Your child with special needs, your child with a disability knows what they need when you give them the resources to understand what they need.
Oh, I just love that. I love that message because I think parenting sometimes comes a little smidgy too much from the ego. And maybe that's not fair to say, but I think sometimes we forget, we see our kids, and I'll say that I have two boys, and I feel like sometimes I saw my kids as an extension of myself instead of the individuals that they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a pretty common thing as a parent. And I think what you just said is observe and ask your kid who they are and what they
Mm.
need. And that's a really important distinction. And I think that's a beautiful message. And I'm really excited to hear, like, I want to dive in and look more at your events and just see them as they're coming up and learn more about how you show up in the world and all the things that you're offering to help other people. Because
Yeah.
I think having people find their ways and like their people for support is such an important thing. And I think sometimes I feel like that's harder than it has to be. And then there's people like you going on how many, did you say you had like 100 podcasts or something? It's like, it's
Yeah,
a lot.
517, I want to say now.
Yeah, it's like, holy cow, that's a lot. But also, like, you're making yourself accessible so that the
Mm.
people who want and need to find people like you who can support them on their journeys, they're able to. And
Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful thing. And I really appreciate that you're doing it. And I love it. And I'm really excited that we got to have this conversation.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Is there anything else that you feel like you want to share that we missed? We touched on a lot of things in a short period of time. So if there's, I don't want you to feel like we didn't close a loop or something feels incomplete.
I mean, if they want to find me, reach out to me. I'm an open book. But other than that, I think I feel like I give the best advice personally,
Yeah,
like one-on-one, with every family. But I try to be as broad as possible to address, all when I'm on platforms.
beautiful. How do they find you? That is the very last
Yeah.
piece. That's how I wrap up podcasts is how do people
Awesome.
find you?
Yeah. So Instagram, you can find me at RE02 period 20. So RE02.20. And then you can find me on Facebook at Becca Engle, or Rebby Crafts. So REBE, Rebecca Crafts. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Rebecca Engle B.A. If you're watching this after July, I'll be M.ed.
Nice. Beautiful. Okay, and I'll put that in the show notes too so that people can just click if that's easier. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for saying yes to being on the podcast, and I think that's a wrap for today.
Awesome.
Bye, be you every day.